Oh yes, we're escalating. Now, I'll have a scant few things to say about episode 5, but I will be saving quite a lot because this episode inspired me to write a fully written, fully edited video reviewing it. Maybe you can extrapolate what my feelings were based on that. But one thing I am going to talk about in this video is the near-death experience. Before we get into it, please do forgive the awkward setup. I am currently recording on my phone right now because my camera just keeps draining itself of battery within 15 minutes of turning it on. I have no idea why it's doing that. But anyway, I want you to think about the writing trope of a character going through a life-changing realization, an existential crisis, a spiritual journey, any of the above, while they are ill or otherwise unconscious in some way. And think about why that is so effective and why it is used so often. Does Ahsoka use it effectively? No, it absolutely doesn't. Because this show defies its name. It's not about Ahsoka. It is, as I pretty much feared, it's Rebels Season 5. Now, if you think about any other instance in media where a character has been rendered unconscious and has gone through some level of spiritual journey or some kind of learning moment, think about all of them and how it differs from Ahsoka. The answer is none of this was set up. The most we got about it was Ahsoka saying, "I walked away from Anakin and the Jedi." This one mention is all the setup we get in 5 episodes. They mention that once. The rest of the show is not about Ahsoka. It's about Sabine and carrying on the Rebels plotline. They couldn't squeeze in a little bit in order to make this mean anything, because I've seen people jumping for joy at seeing anything resembling Clone Wars or just anything that they loved from the prequels or the animated series.
This is the Clone Wars!
Yeah, no kidding.
But it means nothing. It's empty. It's like, and this is something Dave Filoni does quite a lot, and that's why I think he was better served in Clone Wars as an anthology series, because it's less noticeable when you are just packaging up one story, doing that story justice and moving on. Dave Filoni keeps saying, "Oh, I don't want to be put into a box," but if you're going to write for a franchise, you kind of walked into that box by yourself. You can't just say, "Well, I'm not going to adhere to the rules of this box." Filoni does this a lot. He knows exactly what to give you to make you happy in the moment. It's like getting a bunch of really wonderful ingredients, and instead of preparing them and making a proper meal out of them, you just dump them into a pot of boiling water, drain them and serve them. And then people say, "Well, he gave you all these great ingredients, all these lovely things you wanted." And I'm like, yes, that doesn't mean he made a good meal. Hayden Christensen gives a very decent performance as Anakin. That girl who plays young Ahsoka, very good. Her chemistry with Hayden Christensen, also very good. I understand why people would like to see a live-action version of these two together. I can see Hayden Christensen put a lot of effort into trying to affect the mannerisms of his Clone Wars era counterpart, and also I assume he studied the Clone Wars quite a bit in order to get what the relationship between his character and Ahsoka was at that point, because when he made the prequels, of course, he didn't know Ahsoka didn't exist at that point. So, yeah, bravo to everyone who put effort in bringing these long-wanted fan elements to life and live action. But what was the point? Was there a point? No, they just exist for their own sake. And I can go back to the prequel. I'm going to save most of this for my written scripted video, because this is something that needs to be properly thought out in order to express how wrong it is. Think about the prequels, okay? And I know some people don't like them, some people still say they're bad. I know a lot of people have softened up to them over the years, but think about the prequels. Think about all the things wrong with them. Think about all the things that could have been done better. Think about some of the things that could have been set up a little bit better. Some of the things that could have been paid off a little bit better. The prequels are certainly not a perfect trilogy. But think about the Duel of the Fates. Think about the ending scene with Anakin screaming at his mentor, "I hate you," while he burns alive and most of his humanity is burned along with him. Think about the devastation on Obi-Wan's face as he screams, "You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you." And then just, again, as his student, his brother, the kid he partially raised, burns in front of him, both literally and figuratively, and he can't bear to watch, and he just walks away. That, problems and all with the prequels, sticks with me. That scene makes me cry to this day. It is tragic, operatic, and just so incredibly well done. You can say prequels had, they had crappy dialogue, or they had too much politics. I don't think they had too much politics. Look at the time codes for how much politics there were. Seriously, grow up. But yeah, if you look at all the complaints about the prequels, still ask yourself, why do people remember them? Why do people keep emotionally getting pulled back into this era of Star Wars? It's not just nostalgia. There is something there. Do you think that, take away all the wonderful excitement that you felt at seeing live action Darth Vader, think about all the good things you were feeling when you were hearing Hayden Christensen call Ahsoka Snips for the first time. Take away all those superficial fan elements and ask yourself, are they going to emotionally stick with you beyond this series? Are you going to keep returning back to this as a core emotional moment? Because that was the power of Star Wars. That is why so many people got sucked into it. There are various reasons, but that is a big one. For some reason, just the emotional connection, the themes, the characters, everything that was brought to the screen was brought to the screen with a purpose. Perfectly, no. Beautifully, yes. But with a purpose. What was the purpose of bringing all these elements on screen? The purpose was because people wanted to see them. It didn't service the story at all. Because think about it. Other than the whales taking them to the other galaxy, you can remove this episode from the show and nothing would change. Not just plot-wise, but character-wise as well. Think about back to what I said about characters being rendered unconscious or being near death and going through an experience where they have to fight for their lives both spiritually and physically. And if they win the spiritual battle, if they win the mental battle, then they wake up and they get to live and they get to continue on. They are changed by what happened to them. How is Ahsoka different after waking up? She's wearing white clothes, I guess. But what's different about her? The setup of a character being in a coma and working through their own flaws and fears is a very effective narrative device that can be used to great effect for introspective and emotive storytelling.
Tell me what you want me to be! A good Starfleet officer? A good Maquis? Lover? Daughter? Just tell me what you want from me!
But there is no setup for the idea that she has to
Live? Or die?
do what? Live or die? Was she ever considering not living? Is that the great dilemma? She has to choose whether to live or die. Okay, if we had Ahsoka displaying suicidal tendencies or even a tendency to give up, then yeah, this would have kind of made sense if we had seen her going through an arc in the beginning of the story where she was considering just giving up on it. Like she said, I can't do this anymore. I'm tired. I was outcast by the people who raised me. I couldn't return to them because I couldn't trust them. I lost my master. My master turned to the dark side. I've been fighting a war. Basically been fighting since I was a freaking child. I'm so tired. I just want to stop. That would have been pretty damn good, wouldn't it? That would have meant that this whole dream sequence actually meant something, actually furthered her character. But there's nothing before this. All these elements just exist because the writer wants them to and the audience wants to see them. They serve no actual narrative purpose, and that is so freaking sad, because wouldn't this have been possibly a definitive moment in Star Wars if all these elements that everybody was dying to see were actually in service of something? We can look at her and Sabine's relationship. I was a little bit excited watching episode 4 where Sabine had the conversation with Balin, and he was saying your entire family died because your master didn't trust you, and I was thinking, oh. I was actually thinking, is this something to do with the purge? Did Sabine lose her family in the purge? I'm assuming she did, unless there's something in Rebels that I didn't see. And I thought there was more to this. I thought they were going to do more with this, but no.
Is that all I'll have to teach my own Padawan one day?
It's just, yeah, Ahsoka used to train Sabine. She stopped training Sabine. Now she's training Sabine again with pretty much no reason to start training her. They didn't establish the reason that she stopped properly, so why would they establish the reason for her to continue? And now all of a sudden it's, oh, am I going to pass on death and destruction to my Padawan? You didn't. This is the first time we're hearing about this. How is this spiritual journey supposed to affect the character if there's nothing before she was rendered unconscious, before she was near death, to change about her? And again, this is something that I'm going to mostly be saving for the video I'm writing. So if any of you have discovered my channel through my Ahsoka videos, and I think a couple of you might have done, you will, at some point in the hopefully near future, get to see what I'm like when I actually think about what I say. But this is connected to Dave Filoni's complete inability to just let this character break, okay? Just let this character have some kind of emotional moment. Not just a moment where she's sad, not just a moment where she's scared. No, something that truly, deeply affects her on a fundamental level to the point where she has to build herself up again. Yet all this is beautiful. But it's beautiful in the way a painting is. It only has one dimension.
What are we listening for?
Don't you hear it? The lightsabers.
Another little complaint. Is everybody freaking Force sensitive now? I said in other videos that the Force is kind of been messed with to the point where it is just whatever the writer needs it to be. We're going to get to that at the end of episode 5. But yeah, Jason being Force sensitive, again, we know Force sensitive is, at least in some ways, hereditary, and his father was a Jedi, so yeah, that makes sense. But basically everyone you run into is Force sensitive, and if not, I hear the fans say, oh, is this character Force sensitive? This character Force sensitive? Is Din Djarin Force sensitive? Is Hera Force sensitive? Considering the fact that she heard the lightsabers, she might be. Is Sabine Force sensitive? Seems like she is now. So this is such a huge galaxy, and Force sensitives are supposed to be a very special, tiny part of it. A very, very fundamentally important part, because the Force is what makes the galaxy go round. It's what's made up of everything. But the way these stories are being told, it makes it look like Force sensitivity is not really anything special anymore. Basically, every second person we run into is freaking Force sensitive. And about messing up what Force sensitivity is, I really think Disney has screwed up Star Wars in a lot of fundamental ways, but technically this is not something I can lay at their feet. Like, the EU did that a lot. Like, we had Sith that could eat planets, but when we get to Sidious, we get politically savvy Sith, which, you know, is like, which to a certain extent is kind of equally evil. But yeah, this is not a Disney-specific problem with Star Wars, but Disney just takes it to a whole other freaking level. Like I said, it's like they don't care anymore. They just simply don't care. The Force is just whatever the writer needs it to be. It does whatever the writer needs it to do. But this ability, psychometry, I think it's called, the ability to touch something and get psychic feedback from it, that is a very, very rare ability, even among Force sensitive. I think Quinlan Vos is the only Force sensitive I know that actually has this ability, and he has to wear gloves constantly because he doesn't want to touch something and suddenly get years and years of psychic feedback, which again kind of puts the interesting edge on, well, you may be powerful if you're Force sensitive, but there are some drawbacks. There are drawbacks to your life. It's not all fun and games. You have consequences to having power. But yeah, they needed Ahsoka to know where Sabine had gone, so she picks up the map and she knows. Whatever. One thing I do think is really good that they added to the lore, I know this was in Rebels, but this is... Dave Filoni did write Rebels as well, so let's give him the credit here. I do think the addition of the whales is very good because it makes a lot of sense. Like, in our world, we get our scientific advancements from the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, the oceans, just basically studying the world around us in order to be able to replicate these things for ourselves. Because we may be brain-wise, we're very clever, brain-wise, we may be the higher species, but we suck, okay? Like, we really suck. We don't have sharp teeth or claws. We're, pound for pound, we're pretty freaking weak, okay? And I think the same can be said for a lot of the higher species of Star Wars as well, Wookiees aside. And even looking at the Wookiees, like, their society is primitive in comparison to the other species of Star Wars that aren't as physically capable. If you have physical limitations, but you have higher brain function, you're going to study the world around you in order to, you know, make your life better, to survive, basically. That's how humanity has become the dominant force in the world. So, yeah, having hyperspace travel come from studying a species that can naturally do it, I really like that idea. I think it's really clever, and it adds to the mythos and the lore and the just basic physical world of Star Wars in a really organic way that is really useful writing-wise. Yep, so good job there. So yeah, to end episode 5, Ahsoka, now completely perfect because she wasn't that before. Again, what changed about her? Psychically communicates and goes inside the whale that ate the whale that ate the whale that ate Jonah, and they go into hyperspace and they in episode 6 end up in the galaxy far, far away. As for episode 6, there's not much I have to say about it, because it does start to move at least the Rebels plot forward, because as I've said, there's no Ahsoka plot. This is a Rebels plot. It does move that forward. It introduces the big bad. It introduces the new galaxy. It brings back Ezra, who they've been looking for. And I hope they're going to treat Sabine's decision to hand over the map with a significant amount of weight, because that was a terrible decision. And this, I have always spoken in favor of the idea that it is okay to be excited about anything, excited about seeing your favorite characters, excited about seeing your favorite stories, even just excited about dumb stuff, just anything, even if it's not quality, still, yes, it's okay. But, and I can't believe I'm gonna say this, this is coming from someone who has been a Jedi detractor since she became a Star Wars fan. Maybe you're too attached to these characters if the only reason you're attached to them is because they're there. And again, coming from a Jedi detractor, I have stated my disdain for the Jedi's villainization of attachment and the, I believe, frankly ridiculous argument that love and attachment are not the same thing. No, I'm going to break it to you. If you are not attached to someone you love, you do not love them. Okay? Anyway, people who watch my channel know my feelings on the Jedi, but that does not mean that I think, oh yes, for everyone, people you love should always, always, always come first, even if the fate of the galaxy is at stake. No, that is not what I'm saying. This is not an either-or situation here. My mother, who loves me more than literally anything besides my brother and my niece and nephew, would not sacrifice the entire freaking world to save me. Because even though she loves me and is attached to me beyond reason, she's not freaking selfish. Being attached to someone does not mean being selfish about it. You can still have to be in the position where you may have to make decisions that do not favor the ones you love. So yes, it is possible to be a reasonable, unselfish human being and love your loved ones and be attached to them beyond all reason. This is just a freaking perversion of that. Again, it's basically enforcing the Jedi's idea that if you love someone that much, it makes you selfish. It makes you willing to sacrifice literally a galaxy because you love them and because you're attached to them. No, like why would anyone do this? Anyone who does do this is a freaking bad person. And I really hope that when Ezra finds out, because it did seem like Sabine was a little bit reluctant to tell him, because, well, he was trained as a Jedi, he does believe in the Jedi ways, at least to a certain extent. I really, really hope that they turn this around and start holding Sabine responsible for making that incredibly selfish and terrible decision. The only other little complaint I have is about her mount, because she gets the mount immediately, and then when it gets scared and runs away, she yells at it for abandoning her, and it's supposed to be cute how it's really upset and it's following her with its head down and its tail between its legs, and it's supposed to be really cute. But this kind of scene has to be done after the bonding has been put in place. Why is Sabine angry that this random animal that she literally just got abandoned her? Seriously, she's Mandalorian. They are a people that are one of the greatest beast tamers in intergalactic history.
You are a Mandalorian. Your ancestors rode the great mythosaur.
Imagine Mandalore the Great, or like Mandalore the First, or whoever it was, just tamed the mythosaur, and the mythosaur ran away, and he said to it, "You abandoned me, go away." But at least Sabine shows a little bit of martial competence in this scene. Happy to see that. But again, personality-wise, culture-wise, or anything, she just doesn't come across as Mandalorian to me. Her Mandalorian heritage really has no effect on the story at all. Which is really a shame, because it could show the clashing of these two cultures. Cultures that are basically opposite of each other, and we could expand the Star Wars universe, expand the Force, basically. And if you want to say the Force is not just a possession of the Jedi, like other people can use it and other people can use it in other ways, then yeah, what would a Mandalorian's view of the Force be? That might be interesting to see. Her Mandalorian armor is just clothing. It's not who she is. It's not where she comes from. It's not her people. Like, say what you want about Din Djarin and the Mandalorian, but especially in season 1, you could feel that being Mandalorian was a huge part of who they were. And then again for season 2 and Bo-Katan, you could say, yeah, they did it in a different way, but being Mandalorian affected how they fought, what they believed, what they did. It affected how they lived their lives, their way of life. With her, it's just clothes. And I didn't mention this before, but it's really, really obvious when her stunt double has stepped in. I mean, look at this episode and see what the actress playing Sabine is like and what she's like when the visor goes down. And while I do think the actress in physically does look like how I'd probably imagined Sabine to look, she couldn't have put in a little bit of training. Her arms are, I say, skinnier than mine. This is what a woman who has trained as a warrior her whole life should look like. Muscle definition. So yeah, not mentally a Mandalorian, not spiritually or culturally a Mandalorian, not even physically a Mandalorian. It's just clothes. And another thing, going back to a previous episode, something I forgot. I'm sorry I'm not talking about episode 6 all that much, but there isn't really that much to say. It moves the plot forward, but in a very unremarkable way that I don't think I can really speak on until I see what they're going to do next. But anyway, one more comment, and it's back to the episode where Hera is talking to the politicians, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, but you are making the politicians too stupid. Yes, complacency and greed and powerful people's desire for nice comfy seats causes the rise of evil. It's the good man who does nothing dilemma. The prequels did this amazingly, but you forget that people who are comfy in their power want to hang on to it. Complacency comes with comfort. This is a decade after the Empire fell. There is no way people are comfortable enough at this point in time to be complacent here. They should be scrambling to make sure the New Republic and therefore their positions are secure. The reason it worked so well in the prequels is because the Republic stood for a freaking millennium. Yes, I can imagine the people who were in the seats of power in a regime like that would be somewhat comfortable. But this is a decade, and they're already becoming complacent. So yes, politicians can let bad things happen or even facilitate bad things because they want to hang on to their power. Happens an awful lot. But the situation they have built does not allow for this. Realistically speaking, politicians wouldn't act like this in this situation. They wouldn't just say, oh, our political enemies are now working underneath us, but they pinky promised that they weren't going to do anything, so we're not going to do anything. Even though it would potentially harm my seat of power, I'm just going to trust that everything's okay. And this is something a lot of people in my comments section have brought up. A lot of the problems is because they are just tied into the sequels. And I know the sequels have their defenders. I think their defenders' numbers may be slightly dwindling day by day. I haven't really heard many people defending the sequels these days. But love them or hate them, they do not make sense. Okay, the prequels have their problems, but on the whole, they made sense. They added to the universe. They had a purpose for being. Everything that happened in them had a purpose for being. The sequels just tear up the universe, and as long as they are beholden to this storyline, everything's going to fall apart. They have to ignore Luke. They have to ignore basically everything because they are working towards the point where the New Republic falls within 30 years. As long as the New Republic is going to fall in a couple of decades, as long as the Jedi is going to fall in a couple of decades, they are forced to make these nonsensical decisions, making characters do things they would never do in order to get to this point. And to be completely honest, I really don't know how to fix this. I don't even know if there is a fix besides pressing the reset button, and that's always a cop-out. Coming from a comic book fan, don't get me wrong, I do love me that reset button, but it does give writers kind of a get out of jail free card. Once you give them that get out of jail free card, oh boy, do they build up a hell of a lot of a deficit on that thing. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now with Star Wars. I am getting discouraged day by day. Who is this pleasing? It's pleasing a lot of people who like Clone Wars and Rebels, but how long is it going to please them? How long are the screaming reactionaries going to be shrieking like in The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett when they saw Luke? They shrieked, they got excited, they cried, they forgot about it. In Book of Boba Fett, when Cad Bane came along, they shrieked, they cried, they loved it, they forgot about it. Basically, all this fan service, it needs to stop. You need to actually have a good story first. Otherwise, you're just putting a lot of empty calories in front of us. I remember Revenge of the Sith and how it fundamentally affected me. I remember that final battle between Obi-Wan and Anakin. Is anyone going to remember this in a few months? Is this going to stick with any of you?